Two brothers, two states, one system. We went from exhausted, overweight dads who had nothing left at the end of the day to strong, present, and built for whatever life throws at us. This is Suburban Savages. Let's get to work.
All right, welcome to the first ever Suburban Savages podcast. All right, so before we get into today's actual topic, I want to back up a little bit and tell you guys the real story here, both mine and my brother's. Now, he's not on the mic with me for the first few episodes, but trust me, he will be soon. And his side of this whole thing is really more interesting than mine, so bear with me for a few minutes because I'm going to tell you both of our stories here, starting with mine. So my second kid, my son, he was born right in the middle of COVID. And look, if you have a newborn, you already know. Those first few months, regardless of what else is going on in the world, are absolutely brutal on both parents. And there's no version of that period that gets easy, but there's one detail here that actually matters a lot for this story, and I want to make sure I'm clear about it. By the time he came along, the entire world had already shifted to working from home. So I wasn't dealing with some soul-crushing hour-long commute on top of everything else going on. That stress, that time drain, it was just not part of the equation for me. If anything, I actually had more time back in my day than most dads ever get to have. And I bring that up because it's actually a big part of what made my low point hit different than maybe you'd expect. Because I couldn't sit there and blame the commute. I couldn't blame a lack of time. The problem wasn't some external circumstance I could point to. It was something else completely, something more internal. And real talk, the whole weight thing, it didn't even start with my second kid. It actually started way back after my first one was born. I used to joke around with my wife, I'd call it my sympathy weight, like somehow I was the one who needed the extra cushion through her pregnancy. The joke kind of turned into the multi-year cycle. I've been put on 10 pounds, the belt gets tight, I grind it back off, lose 10, maybe 15 pounds, and slowly creep some of it back on. Just watching that notch in my belt play tug of war back and forth, year after year. On a diet a few months, off a diet, on a workout kick, then nothing for half a year. That was the pattern. Before my second kid was even in the picture, by that time came along and I actually hit my real low point. It wasn't some brand new problem showing up out of nowhere. It was just the same roller coaster I've been riding for years, except now I was finally sick and damn tired of it, honestly. So by the time my son was about a year old, I knew something had to give. I knew I needed a real change. And I did what I think a lot of guys end up doing in that situation. I started listening to every big motivational guy out there. Every mindset coach, every fitness influencer out there. I'm talking 4 a.m. workouts, cold plunges, first thing in the morning, all these herbs and supplements and roots that were supposedly going to make me feel like I was 20 years old again. I went low carb, gave myself one cheat day a week like everybody recommends, and I did this consistently for about 2 years straight. And look, to be fair to myself, I did get stronger. I looked okay, especially standing next to some of the other dads I see at carpool or out on the softball field. But, here's the thing that really got under my skin. Every single time I saw a dad who actually looked fit, like genuinely in shape, I'd feel this wave of disgust. I'd think to myself, there's no way this guy's outworking me. There's just no way. But somehow he's got the results and I don't have them. And I'd actually go up and ask sometimes, these guys, and I'd say, man, how do you do it? What's your secret? They give me some answer like, oh, I just work out 3 to 5 times a week and I do intermittent fasting. And that's the answer would honestly just piss me off because I was doing that. I was doing exactly that. And I still felt soft, still felt tired all the time, just no energy. My wife would look at me and tell me I looked great, and, it didn't really matter. None of it landed. I felt like garbage on the inside, regardless of what she said and what the mirror, maybe should have shown me. I just started avoiding mirrors completely, avoiding anything in my closet that didn't have an elastic waistband. She'd tell me, hey, I wish you'd take me out on a date again. And I just didn't have the drive, in me to do it. I felt defeated, plain and simple. And on top of all that, dealing with all the normal stuff every guy deals with, work stress, worrying about finances, making sure everybody's in the house is good, everybody's happy except me. I wasn't even chasing, great anymore at that point. I was just wanted to feel fine. That's it. The goal was fine. And the moment that actually broke it all open for me, it wasn't anything dramatic. It wasn't some big crisis. It was actually my daughter. And look, if you got a daughter yourself, you already know what I'm about to say. She's my entire world. She's my purpose most days. And at least at least for me, that she's mine. And we'll get into the whole girl dad thing on a different episode down the road. But, this one particular night, I was putting her to bed, doing what I always do with her, messing around, teasing her a little bit, trying to get a few laughs in before the lights go out, And she looks up at me completely deadpan, the way only a little kid can. And she goes, "Dad, you have big boobs and a big belly. You really kind of look like a fat girl." And man, I burst out laughing. It was funny, genuinely funny. We went on, told my wife what she said, and all three of us were just cracking up about it. Finished getting her to bed, and we were still laughing about it together. I closed her door, walked down the hall, and laid down next to my wife, and we chuckled about it. And one more time before drifting off for the night. But that particular night, lying there in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I woke up the next morning and I was still thinking about it because, it was funny, but hell, it was also true. And, it hurt because it was true. My own little girl, she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was just trying to be honest the way, kids are. And that honestly, that one little comment, it did something that 2 years of 4 a.m. workouts, cold plunges, and supplements never managed to do. It actually changed something in me. Now, look, before I keep going, I got to explain something. My brother's not going to be going by his real name on this show, at least not for now. Given the work that he does, he can't show his face, use his real name publicly. So from here on out, we're just calling him Ghost. That's it. That's the deal. And honestly, I think it kind of fits. So while that was going on with me, here's what was happening with him. Hundreds of miles away, completely unaware, I was going through my own version of the same thing. This is his story as best as I can tell it anyway for him right now, and he'll be on the mic soon enough to tell you guys in his own words. Ghost has been in a physically demanding career for, 20 years now. He started in public service, back when he was 21 years old. And the thing is, he really never stopped working out, not completely. It was just part of his job. There was always some level of effort there, but between shift work, the kind of trauma that comes with a job like his, being stationed far away from his own daughters for a long stretch of years, and constant travel, all that started stacking up, with poor nutrition, poor sleep. Weight crept up on him, even with the exercise still happening, same thing that happens to everybody. So Ghost tried everything: paleo, keto, low carb, no carb, carnivore, still had the stubborn ring around his midsection no matter what he tried. Even did a stint of CrossFit, tried running, and I mean like really running, like Forrest Gump style. The guy trained for and ran for an ultra marathon. That's a full marathon every single weekend for 6 months straight just to prepare. And after all that, still didn't look how he wanted with his shirt off. His joints are wrecked. His old injuries from years of hard training and job-related trauma just kept piling up on each other. His wife would tell him he looked fine, and sure, compared to some guys, maybe he did, but he knew the second the shirt came off at the beach or the pool, he wasn't happy with what he saw in the mirror. Same struggle as me, same struggle as most guys, just in a different uniform. So here's where our two stories actually kind of collide. And the two of us had actually lost touch for a few years during all this, not in bad terms, just life kind of pulling us in different directions. Both of us heads down, dealing with our own stuff. Then one day out of nowhere, I kind of called him up, to reconnect. And after barely talking for a couple of years, we got back into it like yesterday. And pretty quick, we realized we were both dealing with the same exact thing, just different states, different jobs, different family rhythms, even a fair split at home on my end. But both of us were running on empty, both of us doing everything we thought we were supposed to. Just no payoff. So, what happened? We played sports our whole childhood. We always worked out at the gym, and somehow we're both still fat, tired, not happy with what we saw in the mirror. And we didn't know it yet, but that conversation right there, that's actually where Suburban Savages started, even though it'd be years before, it had a real name. And what I mean by that's, where it began is really the idea of community, and how important the brotherhood is. So, we started checking in with each other, text updates, sharing what was working, holding each other accountable across state lines. Even though we couldn't be in the same room, we still could do that. And it wasn't overnight. I want to be honest about that. It wasn't some dramatic flip a switch transformation along the way. We also started educating ourselves more, digging into the actual techniques and strategies, really understanding how the human body works. You know, what happens to it as we age. And yeah, there's a handful of other levers out there that are beyond this podcast, at least this episode anyways, than just diet and exercise. And we'll get into that more in depth down the road because some of that deserves its own real conversation. But I want to be straight with you guys, you know, because I see it everywhere right now. There's no version of this where some outside shortcut does the work for you. I don't care what it is, who's selling it. If you're not actually changing how you live, how you eat, how you move, who's holding you accountable, and you're leaning on something external force for a result, the research is pretty damn clear that those results just don't hold. So I don't want you walking away thinking some secret technique or supplement is what flipped the switch for us, because that's not the truth. The truth is the biggest single driver by far was having each other. It was accountability. It was knowing somebody was going to ask me how it actually went this week, not just how I said it went. Everything else we added along the way mattered, sure, but none of it would have stuck without that foundation already in place. You know, more energy showing up different for our families, actually present at practice instead of just physically there. What felt like failure after failure along the way for both of us, that was actually months and months of brutal real world research. You know, it taught us both flat out that, you know, what did and didn't work. And it's actually what eventually pointed us towards real functional fitness, real health, instead of chasing whatever trend was popular that month. You know, that's the real foundation of Suburban Savages. It's not two guys who had it figured out from the start. It's two brothers who were both running on empty and figured out how to fix it together, remotely even, while still working full-time jobs and raising kids. Hell, he'll tell you his side of the story himself soon, but I wanted you to hear where this whole thing actually comes from. And here's the part that still kind of catches me off guard sometimes. Now I'm that guy that I used to ask questions to, the one at carpool at the softball field in the Zoom meeting where another dad pulls me aside and goes, man, how do you do it? How are you staying lean with the family, with a job, with everything going on? Same exact question I used to ask other guys and get nothing useful back for. Except now when I answer it, you know, I'm not gatekeeping. I'm not giving some vague 3-word non-answer. I actually know why it works, what mattered and what didn't. What was a waste of my 2 years of my life and actually moved the needle. And that's what brings us here. You know, somewhere in all of that trial and error, Ghost landed on a name for what this whole thing is really all about. He calls it the shield mindset. And I'm not going to break it all down right now. That's a conversation for when he's on the mic himself. But the short version is this. It's not just about abs. It's not just a number on a scale. It's waking up and liking the guy that you see in the mirror again. It's having enough life left in the tank that your family gets more than just a few leftovers at the end of the day. It's building something your kids are going to inherit, not just a body, a way of showing up. That's what, you know, he's getting at with the shield mindset. And we'll get into the whole thing letter by letter down the road. All right, so that's where we came from. Now let's get into why you're actually here, why you hit play on this thing in the first place. There's a lie out there. You've probably told it to yourself. I know I did for years. The lie is this: I don't have time to get fit. Not with this job, not with these kids, not with this life. And look, I get why everybody believes it. Most of the loudest voices in the fitness space are single guys or guys with assistants or guys whose whole job is being fit. You know, they don't have a roofing deadline for you guys out there in the trade at work and a kid who needs to be picked up at 4 and a softball practice at 6. So when you hear them, it's easy to think, sure, that works for you, but not me. Except here's the thing, guys. Between me and Ghost, you just heard two completely different proof points that this time was never about time being the actual problem. I had more free time than I ever had in my life when COVID hit. No commute, working from home, and I still hit my rock bottom. Ghost has had one of the most demanding, physically exhausting careers out there for over 20 years with shift work, travel, trauma, and he still found a way to train for an ultra marathon on top of it. Neither one of us was short on hours in the day, so if it was time, what was it? It was that we were both fighting this thing alone. That's the real obstacle, not a clock, isolation. I was out there listening to motivational guys that never meet, following plans built for nobody in particular. Ghost was out there grinding through diet after diet, training method after training method, completely on his own, just absorbing injury after injury with nobody to actually talk through it. We were both doing the work. We just weren't doing it together. And that's the part I really want to hammer home, guys, because Ghost said something to me that stuck. It wasn't until we were actually on this journey together, checking in, comparing notes, calling each other out, that we actually started to get fit. Not that we found the perfect diet, not when we found the perfect workout split, when we stopped doing it solo. And here's the thing. We're not trying to build some echo chamber where everybody agrees with everything we say, and high fives each other. We're trying to build an actual brotherhood, dads who don't all think the same way, don't all come from the same background, don't all have the same job or the same body or the same struggles, because that's exactly what helps you learn. Ghost coming at it, at this from 20 years of physically demanding government work is going to teach you something completely different than me coming at it from a desk job and 2 years of chasing every influencer's morning routine. And that's the point, guys. Different angles, different lessons, same mission, taking back control of our lives. So here's what I want you to walk away with. This week, stop looking for the secret that you can do alone in the bathroom mirror at 5 a.m. And no, I'm not talking about that, guys. Find your version of what Ghost was to me. One person, doesn't have to be your brother, but, it could be a buddy, a coworker, somebody in this exact community we're building right here, somebody you check in with, someone who will tell you the truth instead of just telling you, you look fine. That's step one. Everything else, the diet, the training, the actual shield mindset Ghost mentioned, we're going to break all of that down piece by piece in the episodes ahead, but none of that sticks without that first piece. Now, I do want to pump the brakes on one thing, because I'd be lying to you if I said this applies to every single dad listening right now. The exact same way, at least. If you've got a newborn at home, if you're in that stretch where you're up at 2 a.m, up again at 4, and you're walking into work running on 2 hours of sleep, man, I remember that fog. I remember what it's like to feel like your own brain isn't fully yours anymore. Like you're just running on whatever's left in the tank, and some days there's nothing left in the tank at all. That's not the season you push through with willpower and a better morning routine. That's a season you just survive together with your wife, as a team, with your spouse. So I've been there, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you fitness needs to be your priority right now, because it doesn't. And honestly, it shouldn't be. That season is about survival. It's about you and your spouse getting through it together. And that's exactly how it should be. But that doesn't mean I don't think you should be a part of the community. And here's why I still want you in this community, even in that season. Suburban Savages was never just about reps and macros. It's about mindset. It's about holding your family together as one unit, even when you're running on fumes. Fitness might not be the table for you right now, and that's fine. But the mindset side of this thing, staying connected to your purpose, staying connected to why you're grinding through those 2 hour sleep nights in the first place, that's something you can carry with you starting today. When you do come out to the other side of the newborn season, and you will, we'll be right here. The brotherhood doesn't go anywhere. It'll just be waiting for you when you're ready to add the physical piece back in. All right, it's been a long first episode, guys, so let's bring this thing home. Here's what I want you to take away today. Boil it all the way down. The lie wasn't that you don't have enough time. The truth is, time was really never the problem. Not for me, not for Ghost, most likely not for you. The real problem was trying to fight this thing solo. And the fix isn't some perfect diet or some perfect workout split you'll find on your own at 5 a.m. It's finding your people, your version of what Ghost was for me. So here's your one action step this week. And look, if you're in that newborn fog I talked about earlier, this still applies to you. It just might look smaller. For most of you, it's find one person, text them, tell them what you're trying to do, ask them to check in with you. If you're the guy running on 2 hours of sleep right now, your version might be just telling your spouse, hey, I'm thinking about my health again. I'm not there yet, but I'm thinking about it. And that's still the assignment. It just scales to where you're at in life. And here's why I'm not letting any of us off the hook and actually doing this, big or small. I've got a saying my wife and I came up with a few years back when she was coming up with, as a leader in her own career. Success rarely fails in the planning, it fails in the execution. It doesn't matter how good the plan is, how good this episode was. None of it means anything if you close this app and go right back to doing nothing different tomorrow. So whatever your version of this week's step is, just do it. If this episode hit you somewhere, do me a favor, hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening from so you don't miss what's coming next. Next episode, we're starting to unpack that shield mindset Ghost mentioned piece by piece, and trust me, it's worth sticking around for, guys. Until next time, fitness, mindset, family, let's get to work.